looks like it's fixed. All right, cool.
So how are things? We see you still got your cigarette and your coffee.
Yeah. Thanks for coming back on, Rob. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Nice to be here again. Nice to see familiar faces, although you look like everybody else now. You guys finally fit in.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. See, we've kind of been predicting the wave of the future with our
I mean, fucking A. They don't give credit to anybody. Is anybody going to come and find and point you out and say, look at these guys, they were fucking trendsetters?
We were hoping you would do it, but
I just did.
What kind of cigarettes do you smoke?
I smoke these super expensive Merit Ultralights. This is Marlboro's premium brand. They charge an arm and a leg for them, but you know, when I have the regular Marlboros, I'm like, I can't smoke these.
I've never tried those before. What are they called?
They're Merits. They used to call them Ultralights, but now,
because
that's misleading, these are just blue.
Okay. Huh. We're smoking P-Funks for today's episode.
That sounds good.
Yep. So,
let's get right into it.
Yeah.
Talk, like, how has quarantine been for you? Where are you located again, and what's going on in your state?
I am at Ground Zero. I'm on Long Island in New York.
Oh, so. Damn! I heard.
So, wait, do you say on Long Island or in Long Island?
You know, on. People say on. It's not even an island. It's a sandbar, but that's a habit that we all have.
Yeah, everyone from Long Island says on Long Island, and everyone not from Long Island says in. So it's just interesting to me. I've had some arguments with some friends before.
You know, traveling the country and going to different areas and talking to people, the impression that some people have of Long Island, they think when they're in New York, they just think it's the city and upstate. And then Long Island's just part of the city. So they think there's these huge buildings around me all the time. Like, oh, you're on Long Island? People, like, nobody mugs me here. What are you talking about?
Yeah. My mother's from Long Island. I actually used to row crew when I was in high school, and we'd row against Manhasset, which I think is over in Long Island.
Yeah, we're actually from Jersey.
Yeah, we're both originally from Jersey, so.
Yeah.
That's New Jersey. I'm originally from close to there. I'm in the county. I grew up in the county that borders the northern. It's New Jersey's northern border, so Rockland County.
Oh, cool. Oh, you're frozen a little bit. Can you hear us? Oh, our internet is stable. Damn it, we lost him. Fuck.
We lost the Loggia. I'm going to go look at the modem.
There he is. All right. Sorry about that. We've got some sketchy connection here.
Seems like everybody these days, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so I guess I'd like to start off. First of all, we had an awesome conversation with you last time. We appreciate you coming back on. I recently saw a McAfee tweet promoting one of your articles that you wrote. Mm-hmm. Can you go into that article a little bit and explain a little bit about what's it about? And I'd like to sort of talk about that if that's cool with you.
Are you referring to the last one that I wrote? Was on. So I mean, this dates to when the initial reaction to this virus and the introduction of this virus to the country was coming out, and it was a reminder. I told a story in the article that actually happened to me when I was younger, and it was in school. I grew up. It was in elementary school for the Challenger disaster. That's when they had the rocket, and at the time,
with the teacher on it, right?
What's that?
Was that the ship with the teacher on it, the Challenger?
So that was why it was such a big deal. Now, because that teacher was on that rocket, they made an extra point of making sure that all the school kids across the country were dragged in, and they had special setups in the auditoriums. They wanted to make sure that every kid saw this rocket going to the moon with the teacher. And I mean, the setup for that was the thing blew up, and now all these kids are watching. So I remember that event and the subsequent conversation afterwards. And at the time, also raging was the AIDS epidemic, and that people were scared about that. It was new; nobody knew what to expect, and there were a lot of rumors circulating, much like there are now. And one of the kids just made a suggestion, innocently enough, but why don't we just take all those people, we'll lock them up, arrest them, that's what the kids said. But what he meant was essentially isolate them all in leper colony style. And the teacher got, almost flustered You know, it's like, we don't do that here. That's not what we do in America. Now that might be the most efficient answer, or that might be the, you know, that's what the scientists say is the best way to do it, but that's not something we do. That's not considered within the range of acceptable options for action within these borders that we call the United States. So I was trying to make the point, you know, and this is when China was, videos were coming out of there and they're welding people into buildings and, you know, dragging people away in the streets.
I've heard all types of crazy.
Welded people into, they welded the building shut.
They welded, you know, this is what they're saying. I wasn't there, so I can't say they did this or they did that, but
I heard they're making crematoriums and all that kind of shit.
Right. You know, there's a lot of stories. The trouble is, when you have a government that, you know, essentially, even if it's in their best interest to tell the truth, they'll lie, and people know this, they're going to speculate like crazy. And then, you know, a film taken out of context, you can add a whole story to it. So I'm sure there's a lot of that. It's hard to sort through what is what when you're looking at this shit.
Yeah, there's much information about it. How do you feel about, since you are in New York, how do you feel about the job your governor Anthony Cuomo is doing versus Trump? Like, who do you think's doing a better job?
Well,
I don't know if anyone can do a good job.
There are people out there right now who are, and I mean, I'm only saying what I'm seeing. Whether or not they're being serious, you know, they're not here. They can't answer for themselves. But I've seen people say that Trump has whatever the number is now, 20,000. Who the fuck knows? He has all that blood on his hands. You're going to blame 20,000 cases of this on the president of the United States? What was he meant to do? I mean, had he done? And we're talking about somebody who going into this, and same with Cuomo, had the reputation for being a little too the other way. Like King Cuomo was married, not married. Jesus, Andrew Cuomo's nickname was, people call him King Cuomo here.
Yeah, I mean, you can't do right in that type of situation, you know.
Trump, people, you know, for the last 3 years we've been hearing he's a fascist waiting to emerge. He's going to cancel the elections. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. So that's what people are setting him up for going into this. What is a man like that in a situation supposed to do when not a single U.S. death has occurred on U.S. soil? And it may be the case that there were medical professionals someplace saying, you know, do this, do that. What is he going to do that's not going to draw criticism? And what could he possibly do in this realm of reality to avoid every single death from this disease which kills people and has been released into the world, however? What realistically, same with Cuomo, what is the man supposed to do? And I'm not making excuses. I think he's gone too far, but I also think Cuomo, to his credit, has stopped himself from going further. So I'll give him credit for that.
I agree.
I think he's listening to feedback, which at least we got to admire that part. Like, he's taking in some feedback, if not all of it, which is one admirable.
Let's go back to your article though. So you started it off by talking about the Challenger. How did you connect that to the current situation?
The word is also the name of part of the name of a Lee Perry song, Panic in Babylon. And if you listen to that song, I would highly suggest it, but it's got a very chaotic sense to it. And the telltale signs of panic were on the wall, you know, immediately when this started happening. And panic is the best word, having, again, I was a child when I lived through it, so I can only give a child's impressions. But I recall adults at the time and everything else and the way things were. Panic is more or less what I would associate with the AIDS epidemic when it first started. People were panicking big time. You know, people didn't want to have sex. They didn't know what the fuck they could do. They were afraid they were going to get it on a toilet seat. I remember hearing all kinds of shit. And it was panic.
Yeah, I've been trying to go on a Tinder date for weeks, and they're all trying to video chat me. And I was like, why would I do that for a date? I can't even touch you.
You know, the joke is, what the hell was that? Naked Gun. I think it was in there. When they're making love through the giant condoms, they got full body condoms.
I haven't seen that, but
yeah, I mean, and it's like, so, I mean, what point do we get to? And unfortunately, I knew that given the number of situations, we were going to see a shit show come from this. So that was preemptively why I wrote that. I consider that to be preemptive. I haven't written anything else on the subject since, because it's clear the majority of people are not at the point now with this thing where they want to talk sense. And you start talking anything in terms of practical effects, consequences, the assumptions we usually bring into decision making as a society. You mention any of these things, and people get all upset, and immediately you're a scumbag that doesn't care if people live or die.
Right,
I'm not having that conversation. I'm not going to be called a scumbag. That's going to lead to something that's not, So I'll leave people to their panic. I said my piece.
I mean, it's a point I think that needs to be heard, and I know it's hard to say shit like that. But in terms of civil liberties, where do you think this could go or is going?
Yeah, have you heard of Identity ID 2020?
I've heard, a number of different things.
And do you think so? I don't know. See, my concern is, and I feel like a lot of people's concern is this is the perfect blanket excuse / cover up, maybe, if you want to look at it that way, for a whole myriad of different things. Or it could just be, it is what it is. And
it could be both. If I was somebody that had a certain set of goals, and I'm thinking actually right now of two particular sets of somebody's. If I was somebody that wanted to throw Trump a curveball where there was no choice he could make that would be the right one, this is what I would do. If I was somebody that wanted to show the people who is in control and reharness that fear, which is what gives you power over them, this is like hand delivered. It could be a complete accident, fuck up, whatever, however you want to characterize it. It could be a freak of nature. It still is amazing to me that it was hand delivered at a time when people already felt like a lot of these things were on the way.
I know, the timing is so weird.
The timing is unreal.
So we watched this movie last night called Contagion.
Have you seen it?
No, I know.
So it's from 2001, and Sanjay Gupta plays the news reporter in it, interviewing the CDC head in the movie, and it's about a respiratory disease.
It's about a
novel virus.
Yeah, it's very. There's a lot of really creepy similarities. I actually fell asleep before the end, but what was interesting to me is a lot of the exact same sort of shit was happening.
Yeah, they call it social distancing back in this 2001 movie, 2002 movie, which is crazy.
And the army comes in and takes over, and obviously because it's a movie that, shit goes to hell.
Shit goes down way quicker where people are looting stores and the army's kind of delivering meal-ready, meals.
My question is when would we get at that point where cities are completely shut off and it's chaos inside? Do you think we're going to go down that road? Do you think we're...
Well, let's put it this way. I mean, there's things... are there people out there... when you're sitting in front of history, you don't have the benefit of saying, this is going to play out like this and this is going to play out like this. There's people out there, I think, who would very much like to see things go in that direction. Now, in open society, it's how much of that can be justified. Already now in Detroit, we see people leaving their homes in protest, the gridlock event, and they're saying, this is too far. Now, what was actually said to these people, you can't go to your vacation homes. And I mean, it really, they were told to stay home from work. That didn't do it. But when they were told they couldn't go to their vacation homes, they were like, you fucking bitch. I didn't go to my goddamn vacation home. There's nobody there. I'm not going to get anybody sick there. What are you, out of your fucking mind? So it couldn't be justified based on the input parameters, based on, what was actually people were seeing, looking around, hearing, etc. Do I think that there are people out there who want to push the envelope as far as they can with what this offers them? Absolutely. Now, I also think that things would have to take a severe left turn. And I got to be honest with you, since obviously, like everybody else, I've been following this since it started, being plugged in on Twitter, and maybe a little before a lot of other people were. And I've been hearing people say 2 weeks since fucking the beginning of February. Wait 2 weeks and there's going to be millions of bodies floating down the river. And they're being, it's very specific. It's in 2 fucking weeks. It's going to be mayhem. And yes, we've seen increases. So a disease that's spreading in a population is, of course, going to create increases. And people exploit that to make their political points.
Yeah.
Of course, we see increases. We haven't seen anything like the doomsday scenario that's been pitched by a lot of people. Nothing like it.
No, and I have more faith in our country than that.
Yeah, I was telling the Wall Street bitch just earlier today, I rode my bike to get groceries, and I was riding my bike back, and some guy was on his bike, wearing a mask and stop me on my bike not wearing a mask to yell at me for not wearing one. When I have 3 friends who are an ER nurse and 2 other nurses in the COVID wing of a hospital that says masks don't do anything outside. There's no point. And the guy stopped you to have a conversation, which that's where it would fucking spread, you know?
Whether or not there is a point, if you see somebody without a mask and you don't feel comfortable going near them, don't go near them. This is a public fucking space. I see people with dogs sometimes that, you know, the dog doesn't look very well adjusted to me, and I walk a wide arc around them.
Exactly. People can walk a wide arc around me, and I'm not going to say shit to you, but they literally stopped me for biking on the other side of the path without a mask on. I was like, fuck you.
So, Rob,
one good thing to come out of this, not to cut you off, but you did remind me of something that's been very much on my mind. And this is a long overdue conversation with a lot of the people who happen to inhabit this country. And I say happen to inhabit because that's exactly what it is. They were born here and they were raised here, and they view this as their country. Many of them, and this is not a love it or leave it speech, criticizing the government is a tradition here, and one that I hold dear. Saying that we can make a better world is a noble goal. So I'm not targeting anybody when I say this, except to say that there are people who don't seem to accept the unique social contract that comes with living in the United States. And that is that everything's balanced against freedom. We don't necessarily do the most efficient thing. We don't necessarily do, the best solution, because we have other considerations that the only charter there is to rule in this country requires. This was a product of the Enlightenment, and we hold this dear. So what are they doing here?
Yeah, agreed.
That's a really good point.
The fucking seatbelt law is a perfect example.
That's a really good point, because balancing freedom and safety and order is really complicated. And that's why it's easier for, a country like China to deal with something like this, because they don't give a fuck about civil liberties.
There's no balance. There is no balance. If you want to know everything you need to know about the Chinese government is contained in a videotape from, I think, 1988, and it's a photograph of a tank rolling over a fucking citizen unarmed.
Yeah.
You need to know more than that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because, like, how far should or can we go, and what's the sacrifice that people are willing to make to hold on to those values, essentially?
Listen, there's precedent for some of the things we're seeing now, and there's precedent not only for the actual implementations, but there's precedent for the disputes and arguments that came along with it. So one of the things that we can do is argue about the shit that we are doing, and that's an important part of the process in this country. People that are trying to silence that, they should be asked to really have a come to Jesus moment and say, what the fuck are you doing in this country then? If you don't share the values of an open society, why would you choose to live here? Go live in Europe. Go live in North Korea. There's different countries that will suit your level of authoritarianism. How much order do you require in your life? Because if you require a subordinate amount, then maybe you don't. This is not where you should be.
Totally.
It's a strange place for you to live.
Yeah. So these are kind of 2 fun questions I've been asking all of our guests. But number 1 is, what are you hoarding? And number 2 is, what's the weirdest thing you bought online while in quarantine?
Well, the only thing I've hoarded is acorns. I've been, for the last 5 years, burying them around the yard.
Hell yeah.
The problem is, once I bury them, I forget what they are, so I never go back and get them. And I think that there might be a small animal around here that's been stealing them as well. So I don't really have. Listen, I've got what I need to live. My family provided for, and we're provided for more than a day. Saying more than that is really just making a laundry list. It's not very interesting. People that don't. If it took this to show some people that they should have more in their house than required to simply sustain their existence for a day, I don't know what will. And I've always taken that to be the case, so I've always tried to stay a little fat in terms of my supplies. And going into this, it was no different. Thankfully, even on New York, where things are a little more restricted, we still have the ability to go to stores and we can have things shipped to us and everything else. So staying supplied hasn't been a challenge. As far as the strangest thing I've ordered online, I don't order strange things online. As I did, people would have a record of that.
So, Rob, we have a little bet going here in Colorado. We throw down $20 on the date that we're going to be opened up again. Essentially, non-essential business is going to be opened up. What's your? I know you've been following this for a while. When do you feel like New York will be back to normal? Because we're hearing all sorts of crazy shit. We're hearing October. We're hearing 2021. What do you think?
You'll continue to hear crazy shit. Anybody who says they know the answer to that question is lying. They're just guessing. Maybe people can make educated guesses, but now you're into playing the stock market and reading charts. I don't consider that kind of shit a good use of my time, so I don't do it with events either. The governor, the messaging that he's providing anyway, would lead anybody to believe that this is something that's very much an ongoing evaluation. If you take him at his word, and so far what he has said, he largely has done. If you take him at his word, then it's going to follow the natural progression of a virus that can do one of several things. And it's of those several things that is what the future is going to be based on. Listen, if this shit tapers off from here and the warm weather comes through and it actually does have some kind of effect on the spread and it's dampening it down a little bit. I know Long Island, we're very humid here, so that may stop it from spreading the way it has. Then people say, now it's harder to justify keeping things closed. There's already at this point people clamoring to have things reopened. The entire idea of closing down an area, I'm sorry, I regret that there are people who are dying. I don't ever want to see anybody dying. I'm not going to say it's a tragedy when an 89-year-old person dies, and I don't care what the circumstances are.
No, it's a tragedy when an 18-year-old dies, but it's not when an 89-year-old dies.
To define it as a tragedy is to completely write the word out of the English language. I mean, and I'm not going to do it. I'm sorry they're dead, but the people that are bringing up other causes of death are not trying to compare on a one-to-one basis this virus to those causes of death. And I think that maybe they don't state their case very well sometimes. And so that message gets lost. But the reason why people bring that up is to demonstrate that we don't shut down society for these levels of death. There are levels of death that are known in our society. They occur on a regular, recurring basis, and we continue to function under them. Now,
that's always been my point.
Pardon?
I said that's always been my point. Continue, sorry.
In a reasonable world, what are we really, the reaction to something like this? I've seen people say, and actually try to make the case that it's not economically viable to ask vulnerable people to stay home. Then in the next breath, these people go on to advocate that everybody stay home. How is it not economically viable for the vulnerable people to stay home? Oh, we could never do that. But everybody can. I don't understand the logic in that suggestion.
Yeah, and also the people who are healthy, who are unhealthy, or who are at risk for coronavirus are probably in large the least vulnerable economically. It's the young people who are the most vulnerable economically right now that are getting fucked over.
It's also people who run
people of middle age, people who have kids who have to deal with their kids at school, at home, homeschool kids and work.
Well, just think about how many people die in car crashes every year. I don't know the number, but it's something above 50,000. It's huge. We don't shut down the freeway.
I was almost one of them.
Really?
Oh yeah, and I mean we're talking just about as bad as it could get. And interestingly, the guy was not drunk. The guy had no drugs in his system. When they came back, that was actually from an autopsy because he was dead.
Holy shit! What happened?
This guy hit me at an intersection, and this is a 4-lane road. I had crossed two lanes and was in the third, so 2 directions each way. I had made it that far. This guy blew 2 red lights or something. He was going about 90 miles an hour in a black truck with his lights off at night.
Holy shit.
Sober, too. That's the craziest part.
There's no way he was sober. That's crazy.
Stone cold sober.
Wow.
I saw the autopsy report. He didn't have a drop anything in him. They had him on the phone up until when he died, but I didn't get any more details than that. Now, that's not just, to me, that's somebody that's angry and they're not, they're raging and just, whatever. So, but my point is that if you want to make a case that there's a situation where somebody was killed and had no responsibility, I would think that's a fair case. I'm crossing from my green light, and I've made it across most of the road when this guy hits me in a black truck at night. I mean, there was literally no way to avoid that. So if anybody would be able to say, these roads are unsafe, it should be me. And I mean, I got back into a car after that. I didn't try to stop anybody else from getting back into a car after that. These are the risks we accept if we're going to go out and function as human beings. The person next to you might get you sick. I don't know what to tell you. If that bothers you, you isolate yourself.
Wear a mask. Or wear a mask and gloves.
If you
don't criticize the person next to you.
If you were in charge, is that what you would do? You would just give everyone the information, be like, this is what's going on. You can go outside if you want. But these are the risks. Let's keep our country open.
If I was in charge, we would be seeing deportations on a scale that I cannot even describe to you right now, my friend. I would be deporting people in this country at such a rate that you wouldn't be able to keep up with it, because these people don't belong here. They don't cherish freedom, and they do not in any way share the values that this country was founded on. So it's a good thing that I'm not in charge, because a lot of people would say that's not a very nice thing to do. But
what people are you just talking about? Illegal immigration in general, or?
I'm not talking about illegal immigration. I'm talking about.
He's talking about people that don't want freedom, that criticize.
We're calling the police on their neighbor right now. Okay, yeah. I'm talking about them. If you went to a police station and I was in charge and you were tattling on your fucking neighbor right now, that would get you on a boat, my friend. I'd be the next day. I don't know what you're doing here, but pack your shit and fucking move. We're sending you to fucking North Korea, and you can live in a police state like you want to. That's what I would do, because these people are out of control.
Yeah, no, I see that point, and that is a huge issue with our country now, especially with the internet. It's fucking insane. Just people keeping watch on everyone else. And that's
part of the reason why we're
anonymous,
too.
That's part of the reason we're anonymous. That's just normal right now, and it's a weird place to be in. People
debate this subject of being anonymous about the internet, and what's amazing is that you're reading it and you're saying, "Wow, here is an individual who has absolutely no knowledge of history whatsoever," because they're discussing being anonymous like this is an invention that came with the internet.
It's like the American Revolution, and we get so much shit for it. People hate us for being anonymous, but we have jobs, because the only way to change society is from within. So you got to work within the system to change it. And then we also work here. We're on both ends of it, kind of.
Alternative media,
yeah, we're working on the outside and the inside to kind of meet it somewhere in the middle, crunch that shit up.
That's why I have a lot of respect for you for, the articles you're putting out and shit.
Yeah. Because I may or may not be a school teacher and have had my students read your articles. So.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. Young minds are, I think, the best ones to try and reach, because they haven't been hermetically sealed off against new ideas and prejudices, biases. They haven't collected all these things over a lifetime. And then, you talk to adults and they don't even want to hear what you're saying. I can follow my Twitter wave, okay, and I can watch, and if I'll say something, that's maybe characterized as right-wing one day, I'll see a bunch of people drop off, and I'll get a bunch of extra followers, and I'm like, this is the wave, watch, because the next day I'll go out and I'll say something that people consider to be left-wing, or I'll retweet some progressive politician or Barrett Brown, and then I lose all those people that came the day before.
Yeah,
and a bunch
insane. Like, half of that is an algorithm, I bet, too. It's wild.
They want somebody to agree with you. No, they just want somebody to reinforce what they already think. They're not looking for new ideas.
Confirmation bias is what that's called, I think. Yeah.
See, that's how I sort of view I view the internet mostly negatively because of that. It's too much information. There's no truth anymore, and everyone it's just chaotic. It's too many options, too many truths. I don't know. Do you see a benefit to the internet? I mean, there is, but
it magnifies some of the difficulties we have with discourse. Okay. Now, if I'm sitting in the room with you, or even if we're on a video link like this, and you ask me a question, and or make a point, and I don't say something, I'm going to be sitting there looking stupid. Okay, and that's a natural check on my inability, what should be my inability, to squirm away when you've made a point that shows mine to be incorrect. And so we have checks for this in person. On the internet, how many times have you read in a comment board or even on Twitter or whatever, you'll see an exchange that people are going back and forth. One person makes a point that's obviously, to any person with a brain, devastating to the other person's case, and the other person just disappears. And you're like, oh, wow, did they leave the website? But no, then you find them posting in some other thread someplace else. So they just left off the conversation. You can do that. You're free to do that. I'm not even suggesting that we should restrict that. But look at the problem it creates. As soon as somebody begins to get through with something, the other person has the option of disengaging and walking away and not looking stupid in the same way they do if they did it in person.
Yeah, there's no way to ever really hold people accountable for those actions as long as there's an internet.
It's hard. Some of the shit in cryptocurrency that's trying to marry social networks with monetary systems is interesting for this reason. If you give people a monetary interest in continuing the conversation or at least pursuing it to a resolution, you'll maybe see less of that. Just having out and out rules against it. How do you do that without, stampling or, really putting a wet blanket on discourse? I don't think that, I'm not a big fan of rules. I don't like fixing things that way, but it is a problem. To say it isn't an issue, and then you add to it, unfortunately, the large percentage of people who choose to remain just ignorant of things. It's hard to have discourse with these people, and yet they populate the internet too. They're on these message boards too, and they're there with an agenda usually, and they're just trying to promote whatever the one thing is that they think.
The agendas are blinding.
Oftentimes they're paid too by corporations.
Yeah, or they're just completely fake. Well, what do you think about them using blockchain for storing personal documents? Have you heard of
ID 2020? It's like they're gonna try to store all of our. It's sponsored by like Bill Gates mainly, and they're gonna try to store all of our personal data when you're born into some sort of digital identity.
Yeah, hey, listen, that doesn't. Bill Gates, of course, he wants that. That man is about as sinister as a human being I've ever seen.
Yeah,
and literally, he should go around wearing a gray collarless suit. I mean, if there's anybody,
they just had a conference, and now with like COVID, and I heard the California governor is talking about like really intense testing, where I think people are gonna start having chips in them soon with this vaccine as the first round. That's a fear I have.
It's gonna be a chip in me.
But yeah, I'm not gonna get the vaccine for that reason, and also have O-negative blood, which I think makes.
But listen, this brings to light other discussions. I wish. I don't know the name of the freaking book. This person I follow on Twitter is an author, and they actually wrote a book. I wish I remembered the name. Extremely good, but it talks about a future where.
Let us know later, and we'll tweet it out for sure.
Oh, cool. It's medical and identity information are on chips, and it's pretty much mandatory to participate in the larger society, but it's not actually legally required for people to have these. And the book sort of shows this dual society that now exists. There are people who have access to places, access to resources, and can actually make what we would call a life. And then you have everybody else. And these are the proles, what in the movies would be the mud people living under the bridge. And it essentially breaks down to that.
Yeah,
what's his name?
We started watching, she doesn't know right now, but we started watching this show on Netflix. If you need a show called Outer Banks, and they have pretty much, there's the kooks and there's the pogues.
Yeah.
And so what you're describing as mud people, I think, would be the pogues.
Now, that's interesting because, we're forced by society to do certain things that most of us wouldn't want to do so that we have that access to a certain type of life. And that's exactly how they do it.
Listen, we already have these pressures. You alluded to them before. If you want to have a responsible, a position of any responsibility in this society, if you want to be in a situation where you're employable, there are certain things you don't want to do in front of a camera. Well, that's already a system that's in place to weed out the people that are, going to submit to the requirements of society versus people who are going to rail up against them.
That's why we're somewhere in the middle. It's a confusing place to be.
Codifying that shit, it's downright dangerous. And it's one of the reasons that I remain involved with cryptocurrency and the blockchain and everything else, is that the concepts that are being developed there are not quite so, at this point, the cat's out of the bag for sure, but somebody would have come up with them eventually, and people have come up with forms of them before. This stuff is not going to be, you can't keep the wraps on it. So we know that these are the types of tools that the powers that be and people who want to control others, they're going to use them because they're going to come up with them and they're going to try to roll them out. So if the people themselves don't have their own tools that they've built up over time and secured against those vectors of control, then we're left with nothing, because when they take cash away, what are you back to? Barter? You're going to walk over to your neighbor's house with 15 fucking chickens? I mean,
15 beads, brother.
Really, how absurd, especially.
He froze.
You froze, Rob. Rob's frozen right now. We're waiting to see if he resumes.
Rob is frozen. I love his background.
Yeah, what does he have? Like a picture of the Clash, McAfee, a danger sign.
No, he's really
Is
frozen.
that Biden in the top right?
No way.
Who is that up there?
I don't know. You can't really tell. That's asking. Man, he's really frozen.